Welcome back to the Us versus Them channel. I'm your host Vince, and we're going to be breaking down the co-main event for the fights for UFC Rio this weekend. The co-main event, we have Deiveson Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. Figueiredo is currently sitting at a plus 220 underdog, and Jackson is at a minus 295 favorite. Whoa, what the fuck with these lines? I'm telling you guys, when I first saw the lines, I thought it was a mistake. I do think this is going to be a relatively competitive fight. I'm leaning more towards Montel Jackson just at this point in Figgy's career. But 3-1 favorite for him? Nah, fuck that. There is no value in that. If I was you guys and I'm doing a money line pick, I'm going to tell you flat out right now, run Deiveson Figueiredo, because there is not a fucking ounce of value in the Montel Jackson pick at money line. When I'm breaking down their striking, one of the things I notice is they typically are both predominantly boxers in their striking. Both guys do throw some kicks every once in a while. Figgy will land a short elbow. When he gets really, really close in range, he'll grab the hands and kind of, give you an elbow. We saw that in the Peter Yan fight, and we've seen him, we saw him do that in one of the Moreno fights too. But, for the most part, they are typically throwing hands. There's not a whole lot of kicks. Figgy, one thing you notice about him, he's got that signature stance where he kind of fights really lean back. He's always, he's a little bit, his back's arched or whatever. It makes it a little harder for his opponents to touch his face, for sure, touch his head, but it also kind of leaves him open for those leg kicks. We have seen, opponents in the past find some success in the leg kicks. I don't really count on that too awful much against Montel Jackson, since he's not really known to throw leg kicks. It's just something worth noting. Another thing I noticed about Figgy, and you guys probably know this about him too, he's lost twice technically by knockouts, but one of those was a 50-50 position that he lost against Corey Sandhagen. He blew his knee out a little bit. That was a grappling exchange. Because his knee got blown out, he couldn't continue. They counted that as a TKO stoppage. And then the other one was an eye injury that he got during one of the Brandon Moreno fights. Obviously, doctor stops the fight, cuts too close to the eye. There's nothing you can do. You can't really control that. What you haven't seen when it comes to his knockouts is him getting big concussive blows. And that's mainly because he's really good at not getting hit. He's got pretty good vision. He's pretty defensively sound. And I also think, too, there's a component to it that he's fought a lot at the 125-pound division, which obviously of all the men's divisions has the least amount of knockouts percentage-wise. But they also have guys that are typically a little bit shorter, too. So he's able to kind of take more risks and, engage in the striking a little bit more freely than he was against Corey Sandhagen, and I think more than he is going to be able to against Montel Jackson. These guys are big for the division. Jackson's got, he's 5'10". He's got a pretty sizable reach advantage. We're talking 75.5 inches to 68 inches. He's got a decent reach on him. So Figueiredo, although he's never really truly been knocked out, this is a fight where if he's not minding his P's and Q's, it can definitely happen. Figueiredo does have pretty solid boxing, but one thing I noticed, especially in like the Peter Yan fight, when he starts to fight a little bit, I don't know if emotional is the right word, but maybe when he feels a little bit more trapped and he's feeling down on the scorecards, he starts to headhunt and he's really going for those big punches. And obviously those are more telegraphed, so it's really easy for his opponents to see it coming and kind of evade it. But it also, when he throws it and he misses, he's really overextended. And he's not in a good position to land any other offense following that big strike. So that's something he's going to really, we have seen him fight a little bit more measured before as well. That's where he finds his success. But when he starts to feel a little bit down, he gets overextended. I mean, that's pretty much a fucking wrap for him. You don't really see him fight his way out of that as far, at least there is no tape of that as of yet. But like I said, he does tend to headhunt a little bit in fights, but he does his best work when he mixes in those shots to the body. He's got really good boxing, like I said, but, in order to get the opponent's fans from over here to here, you got to land those body strikes, and we have seen him do that in the past, and it does open him up for those head strikes. Montel Jackson on the other side, obviously he's got really good boxing too. He's kind of been on a little bit of a tear recently. He's, 3 nice performances in a row, 2 of which come by way of knockout in the first round. And the last fight, he beat Daniel Marcos by decision. And Marcos was coming into that fight undefeated. I think he was a little bit overrated being undefeated, but that's a different story. But he carries big power in his hands. He's got really clean, straight punches, especially early on in the fight. The first half of round one, this dude is really dangerous. He's looking to put your fucking lights out. Once he kind of makes the decision, it seems like in his head, like, all right, I'm not getting this guy out of there. We're going to go to the end of the horn. That seems like the one of two ways that it goes for him. He either gets an early knockout or it's going by decision. But either way, those long straight punches are going to help him a lot in this fight. Like I said, he's already enjoying a size advantage and a reach advantage. So the straighter and faster you can keep those punches, the more success he's definitely going to have. Figgy, we're gonna see him kind of lunging in and exploding in to land strikes, and as long as Montel Jackson's aware of that and expecting that, he's going to be able to find those counter strikes and just kind of stick something out there for Figgy to run into. Montel Jackson on his feet has shown that he's also really defensively sound. I think both these guys do a really good job of protecting themselves and not eating huge shots when they're in the middle, like right in the range of their opponents. But we have seen in the past where Montel Jackson was maybe a little bit too hesitant on his feet. He could benefit from sometimes throwing more volume. It seems like the last few fights that we're kind of working through that, working away from that. But it's something worth noting. He has been shown in the past where he can be a little bit too gun shy. I really don't expect that to be the case this fight. This is the biggest fight of his career by a mile. You go in and win this fight, it opens a lot more doors than he's ever had open in his whole career. So I fully expect to get the best version of Montel Jackson this weekend. Where Montel has shown where he struggles in the past is in the grappling. We have seen him get kind of wrestle fucked before in the past. We saw that against the dude that beat Merab, what's his name? Ricky Simone. We saw that in the Ricky Simone fight where Simone just kind of was out wrestling him, out grappling him, controlling him on the top. That was several years ago at this point, and we saw that a little bit in the Marcos fight for sure. That was a little bit concerning, but you can definitely tell he's making improvements on this. Bottom fighting is similar to bottom wrestling in the sense that sometimes you just gotta make a decision that you're not gonna be on bottom anymore. You just have to make a decision. As long as you've done enough drilling and enough preparation and all that shit, your body kind of takes control after that. You just have to make a decision, like, I'm not going to let this guy stay on top of me for 3 or 4 minutes. I fully expect us to get that version of Jackson this weekend because, like I said, this is the biggest opportunity he's had in his career. On the other side of that, Montel might struggle a little bit in the grappling, but that's something where Figgy has shined, since he's moved up the bantamweight division. He was on a nice streak of wins in the bantamweight division, and all those he was leaning on his grappling more so than the striking to get the victories there. When he was a 125-pounder, he was definitely leaning on his hands, his power, his knockout power, his good jiu-jitsu. He was looking to finish fights, but he really wasn't looking to grapple and control opponents. He's leaned more towards that in this part of his career, and we've seen him have success doing it. But, we've also seen him kind of take a little bit of a step back in his performances, the last couple of performances. Last fight we saw him against Sandhagen. He got caught in a scramble, a 50-50 position. And, I think if that's one of those positions, you have to be really mindful of what you're doing for sure. And, the high head's always going to win those positions. In any type of scramble, whoever gets their head up the highest is probably going to win the scramble. And we saw, Sandhagen was just more hungry to get his head up there, more so than Figgy. And, that's why Figgy, the pressure is on Figgy's joint and not Sandhagen's at that point. We saw in the Peter Yan fight, Peter Yan was able to get some control time on top, and he really wasn't able to work his grappling there either. So, if Figgy goes in there and he's able to get takedowns early and get good control time, he definitely has a path to victory. But it just makes me wonder if he's going to be able to do that. For my official prediction, I'm leaning towards Montel Jackson. I was really hoping when this fight got signed that we can get a much better line than we have now because this line fucking sucks. It is atrocious. It's probably the worst line that we've ever had since I started doing this YouTube channel. Hate the line. But, at this point in Figgy's career, it really kind of is hard for me to pick him. He doesn't really seem like he's fighting with the same tenacity to win fights and do damage that we did see when he was on his way up in the flyweight division and when he was defending his belt against the flyweight contenders. Seems like the Figueiredo or the Moreno saga took a little bit out of him that he never really got back. We saw him maybe have a little bit more favorable matchups early on, or the first 3 fights in his bantamweight career. He fought, Rob Font. Rob Font's not really an easy out for anybody, but Rob Font is also a little bit getting up there in age. So even when they had the fight, he was definitely no spring chicken for sure. He followed that up by Cody Garbrandt, who is a shell of his former self. Cody Garbrandt is not the quality win that it used to be for sure, and we all know that. I mean, everybody watching my channel knows that. And then he followed that up with the Cheeto Vera win, and that was the Cheeto Vera that was in his gun-shy version, state of his career. That version of him, where it seemed like we went 4 or 5 fights in a row where he's just not throwing any offense, and so he's able to beat all those guys, and that's great. Still maybe had title aspirations, but after fighting Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen, it seems like maybe those title aspirations are starting to fade for him. He's 37. So right now he's not fighting for gold. He's fighting for the paycheck. So there's going to be a difference in how a person performs when they're fighting for a paycheck. And then you look at the other side of that. You got Montel Jackson, like we already said, who is the biggest opportunity of his career. For Figgy, this is another Saturday, really. He's been in there with way bigger names, way more legacy fights for sure. So I do favor Montel Jackson to get this one done, and I think he's probably going to be the first person to actually get a real KO over Figgy. So for my official prediction, the dude's got too big of hands and hits too hard, so I got to go with him. Give me Montel Jackson by knockout. That's all I got for you guys in this video. Stop back for our next one. We're going to have our featured fight of the night. That's going to be Vicente Luque versus Joel Alvarez. That's going to be a sneaky good fight for sure. And I'm really, really excited to break down their footage and their film and give you guys the best possible predictions out there. So if you guys can, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I forgot to tell you that at the beginning of the video. But here we are doing it now. And that's all I got for you guys. I'm fucking out of here.